And welcome back to Politics Tonight. My next guest is helping to eradicate homelessness and hunger across Chicago with an organization that's been around since 1968. J.D. Miller with the 530 Fullerton Foundation joins me tonight in our WGN Studios. J.D., nice to see you.
Hi, good to see you, Paul.
I should start with the name 530. Is that the address?
It sure is. We're in a building that was built actually in the Civil War, so it's over 150 years old, wow. Just behind a church at 530 West Fullerton.
But of course, the name of the organization isn't as telling as the important work you do, so clarify what you guys do.
Absolutely. So starting in '68, we began serving people in need in Chicago. In the coming year, we're going to serve about 18,000 hot meals to people who suffer with issues of hunger and homelessness. We also provide a foot care and medical clinic.
Now, I was talking to the folks from the Greater Chicago Food Depository about the overall need, but let me ask you your perspective. How prevalent is homelessness in our city, here at home?
Well, unfortunately, it's a problem that's getting worse. This year, 116,000 Chicagoans will experience homelessness, and that's a 10% increase over last year.
And the kind of folks you're dealing with in the foundation are they folks who they were working, they're on hard times? How would you describe the folks you're helping?
Yeah, you know, actually it is a lot of people who've run into hard times. As you walk down a Chicago street, it's sometimes easy to spot someone that you think is obviously homeless. And so as a society, we sort of have this impression of homeless people as mentally ill. That's actually only about 26% of our guests. Most of our guests are people who've had jobs and have had a difficult decision to make between paying a rent, paying a food bill, or dealing with a medical bill.
Well, yeah, in fact, some people often say, well, I mean, many of us were just one paycheck away from potentially finding ourselves in that situation.
Absolutely. You know, there was a CNN Money article just this summer published that said 76% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and 1 in 4 Chicagoans have absolutely no savings whatsoever. And so if they lose that job or they have that medical crisis, often they're going to become knocking on the door of 530 Fullerton looking for some sort of assistance.
And, you know, what you say is so interesting because and it's so hard. If people are doing okay, then, you know, again, this is a great time for reflection. The bottom line is it's hard to imagine there are people who say, I've got to make a decision whether I'm going to eat or whether I'm going to buy medication.
Absolutely.
There's something wrong about that.
There definitely is. And, you know, unfortunately, the resources available are really shrinking as well. Although Chicago sees a 10% increase in homelessness, the resources available for emergency food have actually dropped about 8%.
And why is that?
Well, it's government cuts. We see it every day that, you know, we're looking to cut costs and save money all over the place. And so although we have some great programs in place, especially for women, infants, and children or senior citizens, especially men who are between the ages of 18 and 62 who fall on hard times really tend to fall through the cracks.
The recent cuts in SNAP, the food stamps program, did that impact the work you're doing? Are you feeling that cut, the compliments of Congress?
Well, you know, we do see an increase in guests as a result of those sorts of things. Our meal program, again, I said we serve about 18,000 hot meals a year. We've actually seen a 50% increase year over year of demand in our programs, and are regularly actually turning people away from our doors.
Wow. You know, I want to talk to you about, I mean, some people might think, oh, well, that's what this guy does for a living. That's really interesting stuff. To talk about your career is a bit fascinating and who you work with, and you'll be fascinated by it. I'll have more with J.D. Miller and learn about the 530 Fullerton Foundation after these words. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking about the important work of J.D. Miller and the 530 Fullerton Foundation, the work they do for homeless folks. J.D., I mentioned before the break, you know, this is not what you do for a living, right? You don't run a foundation. And I think the fact that you don't is important, that people understand what brings you to this work.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, my full-time job, I'm the director of sales for a company called Rothschild International. It's a technology organization.
You're a techie.
I am a bit of a techie, but I really started to volunteer actually at the foundation, working in the kitchen. And I realized very quickly I was part of a community of people who realized they had a need to give back. They saw a need around them and really wanted to find a way to participate. So over the last 10 years, I've moved from being a volunteer in the kitchen, serving meals, to ultimately becoming the director of the foundation.
And indeed, talk about the folks who become this community, right? Hillary Clinton said it takes a village, and I think you'd probably agree. It takes a village to make this happen.
You know, it sure does. Before the break, we talked about the work beginning in '68 during the Democratic National Convention. This church had opened its doors to really shelter students from the violence of the protests in that time. But as they looked around, they really realized that there were all sorts of neighbors in need. And so over time, that small group of people who were providing some emergency housing started to talk to local businesses, get donations from restaurants, get donations from a local grocery store, who's a huge source of support for us today. Girl Scout troops, senior citizen groups, a whole variety of Chicagoans really reaching out to help one another.
Who does the funding for you guys? I mean, it sounds like that so much of what you do is based on the help you're getting from, as you say, grocery store and people, or is it about funding that comes in from? I imagine that's one of your messages today, right? People should help out.
Absolutely. You know, we're always looking for financial donations, and you can do that online at our website. It's 530fullertonfoundation.org. But it really is year over year, individual gifts from individual people.
Sometimes, I know we were doing a show on the disaster relief. It was after the tornadoes and all that in Illinois. And one of the Red Cross people said, you know, so many people want to help by, you know, here, I'm bringing you a case of water. I'm bringing you this stuff. and the message was, don't do that. What we really need is your money. We'll handle getting all these other resources as we need to. What is your foundation's view on all of that? You want somebody showing up with a case of canned peas?
You know, we're certainly happy to receive support in any way that people feel called. But actually, financial donations are the best. There tends to be sort of a seasonality of giving, especially around Thanksgiving and Christmas time.
That's why we're doing this show right now.
Absolutely.
Right?
So foundations like ours, homeless shelters and so on, have waiting lists of volunteers ready to serve a meal on Thanksgiving. We actually just received a donation of 600 pounds of poultry to serve Thanksgiving dinners with.
Wow.
And that's awesome. But we'll have the same need in February, March, and September when people aren't thinking about donating food. And so really giving cash contributions today really helps us smooth that curve and provide services 365 days a year.
I'm guessing from what you're saying is that even the influx of cash, it's also we're near end of year, so you get those end of year contributions from people, which people should be thinking about, tax deduction and all, right? Your tax
Absolutely.
deductible. How do you get people to realize this need doesn't go away on January 2nd after the holidays?
Well, you know, it's certainly having conversations like this, and really, because it is a community organization, it's the conversation people have at the grocery store or have, you know, with their neighbor walking down the street and talking about how I felt called to serve others and really sharing that, you know, one person at a time.
You're using this phrase, feel called to. It's sort of religious in its nature. Are there a lot of people that are involved fairly religious? Is that not a key component to this?
You know, certainly there are religious organizations that are involved in this work as well. The 530 Fullerton Foundation is not a religious organization, but we are housed in a building that a church donates to us. So the religious community definitely does support that as well.
So you talked about the critical use of a grocery store. I don't know if you want to mention them or you should. Can you mention them?
Sure, it's the Big Apple store in Lincoln Park.
Okay. So if other stores, I mean, are you more likely to get help from the mom and pop operations, or is it the big chains that can also step in, the Jewels and the Costco's that you can
Actually,
use
it is the smaller mom and pop because they don't have a lot of the same regulations that you might see in a giant chain in terms of what they can do with leftover food. And Big Apple is great for us as a source of fresh produce as well. We really look at homeless nutrition and realize that often we're the only meal during the week that there's going to be a fresh fruit or a fresh vegetable on. A lot of other programs are going to provide, you know, a canned good or some sort of prepackaged things.
And what kind of storage do you have at the foundation for if somebody comes on and gives you all that poultry for tomorrow's Thanksgiving meal? Can you store all that stuff?
Actually, we certainly have storage for, you know, the next couple of weeks,
okay.
You know, freezers and kitchen space. But if we have a giant influx over Thanksgiving, often we need to find another organization who can make use of that. And that's actually why a financial contribution is great for us, because it lets us buy when we need and not have to kind of deal with that seasonality of giving.
All right. And also, just curious, people that you mentioned mental health issues, are there other services you guys provide? Is it just about the food and sustenance?
No, absolutely. You know, we have a foot care clinic as well, which is a neat entree into a larger medical care. You know, if you're homeless, wet feet, wet shoes, wet socks is one of the initial complaints you're dealing with. And so we start our guests with receiving a dry pair of socks. There's a local nursing school who's also partnered with us to help do a basic foot care. And then that sort of leads into a larger medical evaluation where they can triage ongoing issues. And that really takes a lot of homeless people, out of emergency rooms as their primary care, which, lightens the load for us all.
Which means the folks doing this for you obviously donating their time.
Absolutely. So we're really grateful for the nursing school students as well. One of the things we're trying to do is give them more space. I talked about our building being 150 years old. We know that we have the capacity to serve about 4 times as many guests in our medical spaces, and are trying to build a new building to support that.
All right, if folks want to volunteer their time or donate money or get involved, tomorrow being Thanksgiving, can they start by going to 530 FullertonFoundation.org? Should they show up at the foundation?
Certainly don't show up.
Okay.
Start at the website, and there's a whole variety of information there on how to contact us. You can email us, you can give us a phone call, and we'll figure out the best way to go forward from there.
Okay. J.D. Miller, thanks for the great work you're doing for the community. It's really super.
Thank you, Paul.
That's really great. All right, help them out if you can. We'll be right back with more Politics Tonight in a few minutes.